Welcome to the Fish North Georgia podcast, where we talk everything fishing here in North Georgia.
Make a cast over that brush pile and bring wolf packs of spotted bass up.
Georgia is blessed with so many of these electric-only lakes.
No, I didn't say that, Danny. Don't be
so,
speculating now.
Okay, guys, we're back with another Fish North Georgia Minicast. I'm here with professional fishing guide Bill Payne. And Bill, what I would like to know is what's the best way to throw a shaky head? And what's the best rod to throw it on?
All right, that's right down my alley. I'm going to say before I get into it that if, some people ask me if you just had to have one lure you're fishing up here year-round, what would it be? Well, there's no question about it. It'd have to be a shaky head. If you're fishing in North Georgia on our highland lakes, Lanier, Carter's, Allatoona, Chattooga, Blue Ridge, wherever it might be, and some parts out of North Georgia, whether it's Weiss or on the Tennessee River, Shaky Head, it's kind of an equalizer. If you're I think a lot of these guys that fish as co-anglers in some of the professional tournaments, they've learned the hard way, no matter what their guy in front's doing, they're probably better off dragging a shaky head around and picking up fish that those guys are not catching.
Right.
But shaky head is the deadly weapon. If you don't know anything else, you need to get you a box of shaky heads and some worms and get you a setup you're comfortable with and learn how to fish a shaky head. I know different people have different techniques and ways they like to do it. I'm just going to tell you how I do it and how I think, how I've taught a lot of people to do it, and I can't see. Now, granted, I know we got people out there that want to shake it constantly and move it and attract the fish, but I'm not in that camp. What I like to do is I like to make a long cast out on structure. I mean, you got to be at the right place and get around fish and so forth, but you're going to make a long cast. You don't want to close your bail and let the lure pendulum back to you. You want to feed off line or strip line off with your rod, whatever, so that will sink as straight to the bottom as it will.
Okay.
Once your line quits feeding out and you know that thing's on the bottom, you want to kind of close your bail and kind of reel up just a little bit and get the slack that might be in your line, and then you're ready to start fishing it. If one hasn't gotten it and tried to swim off with it while it's sunk to the bottom, you're down there where you need to be.
Okay.
Typically, I mean, it is a bottom bumping bait, and if it's not on bottom, you're not going to catch them.
Okay.
And the other thing, and I see this, when I'm guiding people, and some of them are younger people and some of them are older people, but they're learning to fish a shaky head. The one thing that I notice is everybody wants to fish it a little too fast. They think they're fishing slow, but they're really not fishing slow. And the only way you can tell what's going on is you want to only move that bait with your rod tip. And you want to be up at about 10 o'clock or so, and you want to just move it slow. That's another thing. Part of fishing slow is moving it slow, not jerking it up and then waiting. Right. You want to move it slow so that you don't jump it up off the bottom. You want to try to keep that head on the bottom and go across every little root, every little pebble, any kind of little bottom irregularity. You want to drag that thing across the bottom. But what happens with the way your line floats and the angle of your line down to the bottom, and many times you're fishing it on a slope, an incline that's kind of coming down, you may move your rod 6 inches, and that thing may move a foot or foot and a half. So you want to try to not move it that far. You want to just drag it about 6 inches, and when you're moving it, you have a tight line, And when you stop moving it, you want to wait and let that thing settle, and you want to see just a little bow come in your line. Really, part of fishing a shaky head, the technique is fishing a lot on a slack line. Now, I don't mean your line just laying out in the water so that you wouldn't know it for 2 or 3 seconds if one got it and ran off.
Right.
It's a semi-slack line, and you do have a little bow in your line every time after you move it if you're doing it right. You're going to drag it a short distance, and you're going to stop it, and sometimes you want to even lower your rod tip a little bit to assist that thing going back down. You don't want it just pendling on a tight line.
Right.
You want to assist it by lowering your rod tip a little bit, and then you're going to let it sit, and you're going to let it sit 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, it's a very deliberate and slow-paced deal. Now, some people say, oh, I'd rather watch paint dry than do that. But it's not that bad. It's not like you're just sitting there waiting on. You are moving that thing, and you are trying to drag that over every little irregularity down there. Fish, those spotted bass are down a lot of times. Even if they're up in the water column, they'll follow a bait like that to the bottom. And then they sit there and look at it, and they're going to see what happens. And typically, if I like a Picasso rhino head, and I like it for several reasons. You get a good hookup ratio with that particular head. But when you move that bait, every time the tail goes up on your bait, and it'll sit there for a minute, or not a minute, but a few seconds, and then it slowly starts to fall.
Gotcha.
And every time you move it again, the angle on that line tie and everything, and it comes up off the bottom a little bit, even if you're trying to keep it on the bottom, it does the same thing. And every time those fish, I've seen fish move with it and watch it. And then when that thing starts to fall, a lot of times that's when they come up and suck it in.
Okay, and what kind of equipment do you like to throw these things on?
Over the years I've refined this, but I like an 873 G Loomis NRX. It is a 7'3" rod. It's got just the right tip. They make that in a 7'1", but I like that 7'3". It just has a little tinier bit softer tip, but then it moves a lot of line when you've got a long cast out there, and you can set the hook. You don't even really have to, cross his eyes, as they say. All you got to do is give just a good little firm, solid hook set, and part of that's in the using braid, 10-pound braid. You can use heavier if you want, 15 or something, but 10 works great. It sinks well when you're in deep water, and I've never had the braid to break.
Are we still on spinning
rod on that NRX 7'3". It's an 873, I believe. And, a 2500 size Stratic CI4. There's any number of reels that will work, but, a reel's just there to hold your line and cast. You want one with a good drag, and those have a good drag. But you're going to work that bait. You're going to keep dragging it, and you may come up on a brush pile where when you move it 6 inches, all it's going to do is drape over the back of that brush pile. Right. So when you get in that brush pile, you're going to work it through that and raise it up and get it through the brush, down in it, and then get it out the other side. And as you clear that brush pile, that's a key time when you could get a strike. Now, when I learned to worm fish years ago, which Shaky Head's just a variation of worm fishing,
right,
with a Texas rig, I remember I read a book that Bill Dance wrote, and he was always talking about raising the rod, and then you wait on that tap, and then you reel down and set the hook. Well, today these fish are so pressured, these spotted bass, they're pretty smart, and if you wait on the tap, it does happen sometimes, but if you only are paying attention when you get the tap, you're missing it all, because 90% of the time you don't feel them bumping on that bait anymore. They're just on there.
So you feel a little dead weight.
You feel a little resistance, and if you're paying a lot of attention, you can even feel them swimming with it a little bit. And
Gotcha.
and it is a subtle bite, but it's really effective. And sometimes you can think something's happening, and you don't want to really tighten up, but you just get it semi-tight, you'll just feel a little bump. They're just moving with it, and you'll know it. But it takes a little experience and getting into some fish, but after you do it a little bit, I may be making it sound harder than it is and mysterious. It's not. It's a great bite, and it's easy to learn. You just have to fish slow. And I work that thing all the way back to the boat. And as you're on the steeper the incline, sometimes you'll have to open your bail and let some line out for that thing to go, for that bait to get down on the bottom. You want to keep that thing on the bottom and bumping the bottom, and you want to do it slowly. And if you're not doing that, you're missing the bite. You'd think if there's a bunch of fish out there and they want a worm that, heck, I can drag it across there and work it closer and make more casts and catch more. But there's just something about that deal that if you fish slow enough, there's a difference in them biting it and them not biting it. You can work it faster than they're just not going to get it. I've seen it time and time again. I've had people in the boat that shake the worm a whole lot. And I've caught 8 and they've caught none, and they say, well, I'm not a bad shaky head fisherman at all. I say, well, try not shaking it this time.
Try not to shake it.
And make sure you fish it slow. And the next cast, they catch one. So, I know there's something to it.
Right. And what is a good, I guess, the length of the worm, or do you recommend a specific type of shaky head worm?
Well, I think a lot of things work naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom is a big name, and they make various lengths, but my current favorite is a little worm called a softy.
Okay.
And there's some guys in, I guess, Marietta or Kennesaw, they're locally made, and those things are the softest little nice worms. They make a 5-inch and a 6-inch and a lot of locally favorite colors. And that's a super worm, and it's my favorite right now, and I think they will hold that worm, as compared to some of the big commercial names. They feel hard compared to this worm. They've done a great job, and there's some of the guys that are using it like it's summer at night, and the Monday nighters that consistently do well, and I know that's the worm they're using.
Gotcha.
So it's a great worm for Allatoona, Carter's, Lanier, and they make all the great colors. I'm partial to green pumpkin or a derivative of that, maybe one that's got gold flake or a little, I don't know how much the flake matters. I'm not trying to say that it does, but I've got one that I've been using that has a flake in it, and a green pumpkin, and it does great year round. I've been using it for a long time, but I like a 3/16 ounce head. It covers, really, I don't even need another size, but occasionally I might use a quarter if I'm really deep or something, but
right.
3/16 works, and it'll force you to, even when you're fishing deep, to fish it slower.
So that you keep it on the bottom of that, yeah.
And really, I wouldn't worry about weights. I would get 3/16, and I wouldn't worry about anything else. And get you some braided line, 10-pound braided line, Power Pro or something, whatever your favorite is, and a good 8-pound leader. I know some people can drop down to 6 and claim that they get more bites, and maybe they do. I just kind of stick with 8 because I'm fishing it around brush and stumps and rocks, whether it's shallow or deep, and that's what I use, and it's really successful. But the main thing is a little bit, you can read on the internet about how to do a lot of these things, but with a shaky head, there's no substitute for getting on the water and dragging it around deep and shallow. Naturally, when you're throwing it shallow, you feel every rock. It even gets hung up some, and you can feel everything that happens. And then when you get out there in 20 feet, you start feeling like, well, I can't feel anything.
I understand that feeling correctly. Yeah.
Well, that just means you need to be very patient, slow down, let it sit there longer. Now, once you get the feel of it, you might not have to let it sit so long, but while you're trying to learn and develop a feel, try to make sure you let that thing, absolutely certain it's on the bottom. Let it lay there long enough on a semi-slack line, not a tight line.
Right.
And then pull it. Now, naturally, the closer it gets to the boat, the harder it is to feel anything. That's just physics.
Right.
You got drag on your line. You're not pulling at an angle where you can actually feel it bumping bottom so much, but you still have to let it go to bottom because it's still around little irregularities. And it's just surprising how many times you'll get it worked out to the boat and you've worked it about as far as you think you can. Some people think halfway in's as far as you can, but that's not it. You need to work it down to where it's just a few feet from the boat out, maybe 7 or 8 feet straight down, and let it sit, and you're going to get a lot of bites right there, and you're going to just be able to jerk right up on them. But the key is slow and keeping it on bottom and learning to feel what it's like on a slack line.
Okay. All right, guys, right there it is. That's about everything you need to know about throwing a shaky head. Keep it deep, keep it slow, keep it on the bottom. And, guys, if you like this, I want you to stay tuned for a podcast that we've got coming up with Bill, a full-length podcast that we've got in the future. I think you'll enjoy it. And, again, Bill, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And if any of you guys want to get out on a trip, I'd love to take you, and we'll work on some of this stuff we've talked about.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Fish North Georgia podcast. If y'all have any topics or guests you'd like to see in the future, leave it in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, click that bell so that you'll be notified of any future videos. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram at Fish North Georgia. And we look forward to seeing you soon.